I would now request Rotarian Shrikant Sarda to introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, Mr. President. 21st century is said to belong to India. In next 10-20 years, India is expected to deliver significant economic growth fueled by large consumer base, industrial growth, and increased per capita income. Now, for India to become major and developed economy, availability of enough energy reservoir is the paramount importance. Today, with us, we have very distinguished guest who is among the middle of all the action that is happening in the energy sector and talk on the topic of energy security. How far is India from achieving this? I am happy to welcome Mr. Prabhat Singh, MD and CEO of Petronet LNG. He is an IIT Kanpur alumni with more than 40 years of experience in hydrocarbon industry, working with multiple multinationals and Maharatna PSUs. Mr. Singh is not only a thought leader suggesting new concept, but also has strong conviction and resolve to implement this concept. Under his leadership and management, India successfully renegotiated long-term contracts with no renegotiation clauses and saved nation about 22,000 crores. As a thought leader, he has mooted the concept of small-scale LNG, that is consumption of LNG as liquid only in long-distance heavy-duty trucks and intercity buses. His hypothesis that global market has now entered into a gas buyer market is helping India to secure or procure long-term LNG gas at daily market price and saving a lot of money for India. Asian Development Bank awarded Mr. Singh with the Best Managed Project Award for the execution of the longest exclusive LPG pipeline from Jamnagar to Loni. He is also instrumental in assuring the open access common carrier principle in India. He has been a member of National Auto Fuel Policy of Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, member of the governing body of Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Petroleum and Technology, Rai Bareli. IIT Kanpur honored him with Distinguished Alumnus Award in November 2016 for his professional excellence. Times Accent presented him a CEO with HR Orientation Award in February 2017. It is our pleasure, Mr. Singh, to have you over here today and looking forward to your views on this. Thank you.
Can you unmute yourself? Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Good. Welcome, Prabhat. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead. You want to say something?
No.
Okay. So thank you so much. And Shrikant ji, very nice of you. And I think the download from the net perhaps has got some latest information which you said, talked about the concept which we are talking about buying gas on a long-term basis on a daily marker. That is a very good concept, and while if time is there, we can have a discussion and I'll explain about it. But by and large, let me just say that energy security, rightly so, because having such a large population and consuming on a per capita basis hardly 1/3 of the world average, there is huge scope for the Indian population to really go about and consuming energy. And therefore, when you look at energy security, a very layman's definition by and large is that affordable, continuous supply, uninterrupted energy, if it comes to you, then we feel secure about it. But, and there are so many aspects of energy security when you really want to debate, discuss. There are policy issues, there are diplomacy issues, there are geopolitics into it. There's a plethora of activity. So I think the time is very short. So what I thought when I was just going through, and being a gas man, please pardon me because I will give examples from the gas industry. And the other part is if there is any bias toward gas, please discount that because that's will be inherent in what I'm going to say about. So, but factual position is that I wanted to just pick up one very important fact, and that is technology. Not that coming from an engineering institute, I'm saying this, but today in the energy security, technology is something which is playing a very huge role. And why I'm saying this is that we are truly on the cusp because there is this industrial revolution 2, which happened with the IC engines and the advent of television and telephone, etc. And basically, I would say that the oil became one of those majors. Because it is actually said that any economic upheaval or change or a paradigm shift which has to happen can be seen, it is actually technology driven. And when you look at the 19th century, when the first industrial revolution happened, there are three elements which by and large contribute to it. Pardon me for giving, because this is the background I want to give you. And then I will talk about that what energy security in this context is going to happen. The idea is that for anything to be driven, there are three elements which need to converge. One is that communication, what level of communication is happening. Then the energy which is driving the power or which is powering everything. And the third part is the mobility. Now, when you really look at the first revolution, 19th century when it happened, with the Britishers playing the main role, it was basically coal. And then you had this printers had come up, teleprinting started off at that point of time. And steam engine and everything happened, and therefore the movement and therefore the economy moved from the agrarian base to the industry, basically. Then came the 20th century when you came into the next phase of the convergence of these three elements. And therefore, like I said, we moved into telephone, we moved into television, we moved into radio, which was quite instant. And then oil became a major part. And even today, when I'm talking to you, still fossil fuels are nearly 90% if you include coal also into the system. So oil, gas, and coal are more than 90% of the energy consumption which we do effectively. And then the IC engines happened, and therefore the cars and motor cars have done. So right now we are actually on the fag end of this particular phase which is going on. And therefore there is this fossil fuel which in a way is thought about that on the effect when we are looking at the, I would say this particular element of the phase which is going on is basically, if you see, the demand has virtually peaked. And what has happened, supply is still on. And why I'm trying to say that technology has helped it. And therefore technology I will try and explain in two ways. One is the technology as applied on a delta increment basis, which is happening to this second industrial revolution, which is the fossil fuel, oil-based, etc., which is happening. And I'm saying that, and I'm making this statement, and I will explain to it why it is going to be. But in the next minimum 30 years, you will find this fuel still going to be predominant, despite people saying a lot of things on the renewables, etc. But factually, this is going to be predominating, and why I will explain that to you. But beyond 30 years, maybe if everything goes well, we may move to the renewable phase. And that is why, because suddenly people have realized that in the second industrial phase, when it happened, nobody was bothered about the environment. But now suddenly it has come as a rude shock to all of us, that environment is something which is definitely, it has to be a part of the system. Otherwise, people are going to perish. So because of this fear in the people, etc., they are now taking the environment into account. And therefore, the renewables are going to take a much larger role, etc. Now, let me just try and explain to you the first part, that for me, when I'm saying fossil fuel, why we have been calling it a fossil fuel, because it is organic matter which gets compressed and pressed into the layers and layers of overburden which comes up on that. And it takes nearly 400 million years for one organic matter to get converted into a molecule of fossil fuel, whether it is oil or gas, etc. everything. But what is actually happening is that when you see this fossil fuel, this particular element is, I would say, there is a rule of 70 which plays on this. And the rule is there that normally there's a kitchen where this fossil fuel gets fossilized and gets metamorphosized into the element or the way in which we finally see and we extract. But the issue here is that out of that, 70% remains in tight reserves. Only 30% actually gets released, and therefore it moves through the interspecies, and then it goes and finds a reservoir somewhere where there's a cavity which has a capping, etc., and it gets trapped in that. Now 30% moving. Now this trapping which happens, actually this 30%, these reservoirs which are trapped, when the exploration people go and start finding, they hit a probability for ease of convenience of 70%. So what happens that 30%, 70% is found, so you are left with 21%. Now out of this 21%, when you do the exploration, basically, you will find that there is around 70% of the discoveries which actually happen there. And the wells, the success rate of well drilling is that. So then that brings it down further to 14%. And then this 14%, when it actually is recovered, the recovery factors by and large ranges, which is oil or gas, etc., around 30-32% in oil, and then 60%, etc., in gas, which is there effectively. So virtually you see that 4% is what is there, which all the population, the 7 billion population of the world, has been very lavishly enjoying and has made a great event out of it. You don't find any restriction on any availability of oil, etc. But what is happening is only happening on this 4%. Now what technology has done, and in the hydrocarbon industry, what had happened is that since the extracting or the exploration production cost of a molecule, if you really look at it in terms of dollars per MMBTU, the way they talk about it, it is by and large anywhere between a few cents, the way people in Qatar or Venezuela or Russia, etc., they do. And it goes when there is a very, very deep water, deep seated, high pressure, high temperature sand cut deposit, etc. It can go up to say 10, 12, 15, max $20 or so. Now, when you look at this part, selling oil on a barrel, which is actually looking at a production cost which is around $10, $12, etc. When you look at it in terms of selling it at $147, etc., you can imagine the amount of arbitrage which is there. And even today, when the oil is at $40, it is still at a premium which is more than 50% of whatever it is going to cost effectively. So what happened is that this 70% of the tight gas which had remained back into the deposits, which is now called the shale technology, which has come up, if you heard about it, that shale technology actually is now going to be in a position where this shale technology is through hydrofracking and through horizontal drilling, the economics of this technology, which was considered to be viable at $80 a barrel, has actually come down to the level of even $30 a barrel it is viable. There are some places in the US where it has gone down to even $19 a barrel. So even when you look at the squeeze which the OPEC countries tried to do, and when the oil, after suddenly, I would say, reaching $115, etc., had come down to $50, and then they actually put it down to $30, etc., by opening up all the productions, it still did not actually choke the smaller players which were doing this. And earlier, this particular complete thing was by and large being done by the few 13 countries, etc., joining together and managing everything. Now today there are 10,000 people who are actually playing this game in the US and who are producing on a daily basis. And the beauty of this production is that this particular thing, the recovery factor has now gone to 20% or so. So what was 4% available, you have another 14% now available. So virtually 3.5 times of more volume is now available in the market. And the latest ongoing predictions by GII, GNL, which is a import and export agency in terms of LNG, which is being done, IEA, which is the energy agency in the US, etc., IGU, which is the International Gas Union, they are now predicting that the reserves to production ratio of actually now oil and gas, which we are looking at, this when I'm saying, I'm speaking about the gas numbers because I have been following them much more keenly. So GII, GNL has predicted a reserves to production ratio, which means that these are the reserves and this is the production rate. If you keep on producing at this rate, so many years it will last for you. So on a global average basis today, the reserves to production ratio has been predicted now as high as 290 years, 250 years, 240 years. And still people say that this is the prediction based on what I know of. What I don't know of, that is still going to add further to it. So even if I assume 250 years, we are talking about 12 generations. And then the moment I'm saying 12 generations, what I'm trying to indicate is that for us, if we talk about to each other and ask whether I know my name of my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and so on, I think there are 3 or 4 generations we will forget. We will not be able to go. So when you cannot see the end of the horizon, when you cannot see it actually going over and finishing, to call this a fossil fuel today, in terms of me, which I'm trying to now propagate this concept, and I've been speaking in international forums, I've been saying that this also is now a renewable. Why I'm saying this is that it is like if in your lifespan we are not being able to see that it's going to be over at any time, then for me it is zero cost, it is cheap because it is available abundantly, it is available much more than what we can consume. And just to give an example, if we go out in the sun and there's a sun ray falling on our shoulder, nobody asks this question that what cost is this sun ray costing us. It is only the cost how you collect, how you separate it, how you collect it, and how you transport it. And that is where all the technology today is going on in the solar field or the wind field, etc. we're talking about. So similarly, the molecule in the reservoir of gas which is there is at zero premium today. So all cost is in actually collecting it, storing it, and distributing it. So in a way, it is competing with the renewables now. And why I'm saying this is important is that today, there in the US, there is 850 TCF. And I'm giving you these units because I will just share this with you that what India stands for. 850 TCF of gas in US is costing production less than $2. And there is 80 TCF of gas which is free of cost today. There was a time when actually in the US, in the upper central region part, there was gas which was being sold at -$3, -$4, where people were saying that you have to, because of the emission and the you can't release it in the atmosphere, so you had to pay people to actually take it basically. So overall, what I'm trying to say, the Indian reserves are 50 TCF only. So more than the Indian reserves in US alone, 80 TCF is gas available free of cost today. So what I'm trying to indicate here is that there is a molecule today which is pushing and saying that, look, I want to come out at zero cost or $1 cost or $1.50 cost. But what is stopping it now today is that infrastructure which is going to be, if it is not available, then it's not going to be coming to the burning. It says that Stone Age did not get over because there were no stones left. We are moving in that direction in terms of the fossil fuel today. So in the first 30 years, I would say, when we are looking at, because the renewable technology, which is still, I am saying that batteries are going through a phase of weight. Batteries are going through a phase where retention of power for a longer time is expensive. And therefore, in the end, the per unit cost of power, which is being produced through a renewable basis, if you go from a cradle to grave concept, it is actually much more expensive than which is available from the other fossil fuel today, which is there. So for the next 30 years, till we really reach a stage where we actually end up saying that we have hit the perfect solution. And the perfect solution, I'm saying that right from cradle to grave, when we are analyzing the molecule, it is all renewable, relevant, and therefore it reaches a stage where it is cheap, it is going to be there available, and therefore in the end it is that particular distributed power which is going to be available anywhere across, and therefore wheeling charges etc. will be not counted for that, which today we have to do for the fossil fuel, because we produce at one place, generate at one place, and then you move the energy in on cables etc. So all that part will be taken away. So that I'm saying is still on the drawing board, and for it to reach the drawing board and move down to the ground, there is still some time. There is still, it will happen, because that is the ultimate which is going to be in that direction. But today, therefore, the energy security of the country, when we are talking about, will have to be looked in two phases. One is the first 30 years, which I'm talking about. This can be extended. And that I'm saying is today that, since if I only take the example of gas, gas today is available at, there was a time 2 months back when gas was available at the Indian shore at $2. Today it is available at $4, $4+. There was a time when we have bought gas when it was not available in this abundance. It actually had gone into a system where we have bought gas at $22 also. But the cycle of prices of oil and gas coming up and going down, etc., that cycle, because of this fundamental of the basic engineering which has gone into the technology which has gone into, I will give you an example. In my previous company, when I was working with GAIL, we had taken up a asset in USA, which was there at a place called Eagle Ford. And there we were drilling one well for $14 to $15 million, in a sense. So the production cost has gone down to such an extent that today the only bottleneck which is not allowing the molecule to come to us and be used here in India would basically be infrastructure. If we don't have infrastructure to capture it and the customer base to consume it, we will miss this time. So let us look at, and therefore, because of time constraint, I'm picking up the most important factor in terms of, apart from geopolitics, I think now has taken a back seat, because when you look at availability in the US, a huge amount of oil, they are producing more oil than what Russia and other countries are actually being able to do. So effectively, they have least interest now in terms of acquiring all those acreages, etc., wherever they wanted to, and have a control on the molecule. So virtually what is happening is that today every producer who's producing is dying to put his molecule and place his molecule in a market like India or China, and anywhere there is on the Southeast Asian part, there are a few countries which are buying. Something is happening in the European countries also, where they are buying more gas. But you look at a situation where there is, Iran is out of the equation, Venezuela is actually out of the equation, Libya is having its problems, which is a major producer, Nigeria is having their own problems, etc. US's inventories are actually going down, etc. And recently, some time back, there were 6 attacks on the Saudi Arabian units basically. Now, in earlier time, this was a sure shot recipe for oil barrel to go more than $200 a barrel. But today, despite all this happening, the oil barrel is actually struggling to go beyond $40-45 a barrel. So what I'm trying to indicate today that now to make the oil price or gas price high and keep it there is an effort. And therefore, it is truly a buyer's market as of today. So earlier, like for instance, all the long-term gas which we had bought from Qatar or even from Exxon, as I was mentioning, all the risks were taken by the consumer. They said that, okay, if the chain breaks and supply is not happening, then this risk occurs, and therefore this risk will be taken if there is a loss by the consumer. If there is a profit, we will share with each other. If a cargo I cannot place here, I will sell it somewhere else. If there is a loss, you pay for it. If there is a profit, I will share it with you. So all these risks were basically being taken by the consumer. Now we have come to a stage when all these risks will actually be taken by the producer, and there is this time to squeeze them now. And that is where I'm saying, when I was mentioning this, that today, if there is a spot price available, and in very crude terms, let me tell you, we today in India have the power to say that, look, you give me your molecule, I will tell you all the conditions which I want to tell you. You will have to agree, because if you don't give me this, I will buy it from the other guy. Because there are N+5 buyers today, and N-5 suppliers today, and N-5 buyers effectively. So the issue here is what I am saying, that if you don't give in to whatever conditions I say, you will act by locking your molecule with me. And therefore we did a tender, and in that tender we said that, okay, we'll buy 1 million ton for 10 years time. And in that tender, what happened, there were 124 people which we shortlisted. Out of that, we qualified 24 people. We got 13 bids. Now, this which I'm talking about is basically a bilateral conversation which was happening, no bidding at all. Nobody was even considered. That if I say that, okay, you participate in a tender, they will say you run off. I'm not really concerned about this, because they were all masters, they were producers, they had this molecule, and we were actually short of molecules, and therefore the supply-demand equation was not in our favor. But today we have it. So now today they are saying that, look, please take my molecule for 10 years. And what we have asked them that, look, whatever is the rate in the spot market, I will only take that. So rather than giving them a fixed price or a fixed number or a fixed formula for the long term, I am saying that, जैसे हिंदी में कहते हैं कि भाई जो मंडी का रेट है उस दिन वही हम लेंगे. मॉलिक्यूल तुम्हारा हम ले रहे हैं वो ठीक है, लेकिन जो मंडी में रेट है उससे ज्यादा अच्छा. और उसमें भी क्या किया हमने उससे से भी 5 सेंट कम कर दिया. तो हमारा फॉर्मूला का सीलिंग है कि भाई जो मंडी का रेट है उससे भी 5 सेंट में कम हमें देना है. तो हमारा लॉन्ग टर्म गैस जो हम बाय कर रहे हैं अभी, वो actually it is always going to be cheaper than the alternative available in the market, in the mandi at that point of time. So whatever I am going to give to my consumer today is something that they will always be getting the cheapest gas available in India, effectively. So what I am trying to indicate to all of you today is that this coming 30 years, even if the renewables come up, today the technology has not developed, so they need a backup power for 100% confidence that yes, if the sun is not shining, what happens? If the wind is not blowing, what happens? And therefore, there is a complementary fossil fuel which is backing you up with the base load, so that there is no blackout which is happening. So that this is a complementary fuel there. So there's going to be a bridge. And this bridge is going to be a very long bridge. It may be 30 years, it may be 40 years, it may be 50 years also. So one plan of India is to be that I will capture this molecule now, and I will allow it to flow into India. And how will I do it? I will see that I debottleneck everything in the infrastructure. Now today what is happening, and the strategy in the Indian government which they have made is very nice, is that the national gas grid is on. There is 16,000, 17,000 kilometers of pipeline already existing on a cross-country basis. Another 15,000 will conclude the national gas grid. So already there is viability gap funding happening, and people are doing all that. And therefore, they are basically trying to take you into the system and say that, okay, we will provide you the funds if required, but please put up this infrastructure. Now, there also, there is one issue which is there, that they are funding the capex part. I have suggested that, look, don't do that. What you can do, capex is already available in the market. You can actually fund the initial 4 or 5 years of capacity underwriting when the line is commissioned, because that is the fear, that the companies are not putting up pipelines because their capacities are not utilized, and therefore the balance sheets are getting affected, and therefore their MOU targets are not being met, and therefore their employees are not getting their bonuses, etc. And therefore there is not incentive enough for them to really go ahead and do this project effectively. So what I suggested, that why don't you actually fund this? Like a country like Singapore, they do it, that any infrastructure which comes up is already funded, and any overhang of capacity which is not being utilized is being paid by the state. Similarly, in the US, etc., it is private agencies which completely underwrite the capacity upfront, because only then the pipeline comes, otherwise it is not coming up. But here in India, there is a problem. Now here I'm saying that this infrastructure also needs to be put up immediately, and for putting up the capex requirement is such that if you pick up the 7, 6 or 8 companies which are there in the Maharatna companies, the amount of capex which they have to invest is peanuts. Like for instance, 15,000 kilometers of pipeline is say around 60,000 crores. If you look at the equity, it is 1/3, say 20,000 or 22,000 crores worth of equity is going to be there. And if you really distribute it in 4 years' time when it is being done, so 5,000 crores every year. And this 5,000 crores, when you distribute amongst 7 companies, 8 companies, it is 600, 700 crores a year, annual, basically. Now, this 600, 700 crores, which I'm talking about, when you look at ONGC, their capex is 32,000 crores every year. IOC, they have 35,000 crores of capex. GAIL, you say, for 27,000 crores of capex. Even companies like Petronet, which we have 400, 500 crores worth of capex, but we have the capability of putting up 10,000 crores worth of projects every year for the next 5 years. So what I'm trying to say, that this is peanuts expenditure, and therefore putting up these infrastructure is not at all difficult. But when you do the funding in the underwriting of the capacity part at that point of time, then yes, the government is saying that why should I have viability gap funding cannot be given for revenue expenditure. So the suggestion is that you take creeping equity. The amount of thing which you do, you take creeping equity into the asset which is coming up. So all I'm now suggesting is that the regas terminals which are there, which are to come up, they similarly are not very costly. So the last mile connectivity in terms of the CGD licenses which has happened, today the commitment by the people who are going to put up, who won the licenses, is 1,20,000 crores worth of investment they will be doing in the next 5 to 8 years time to do the last mile connectivity, in terms of laying the HDPE lines, the steel lines, and the connections to the houses, CNG stations, etc. There are 8,000 CNG stations which are going to come up. There are around nearly 4 crores of connections in the houses which are to come up. So all this has already been committed. So India is slightly ahead on the curve. And as far as India is concerned, we have laid the, I would say, table in a very nice manner, and we are ready to receive this. And over and above the small scale LNG which I'm talking about is a virtual pipeline. You have trucks which move long distance, heavy duty, long haul trucks, intercity buses, etc. They are actually going to be consuming LNG, which is going to be nearly 25 to 30% cheaper on a per kilometer basis when you compare it with diesel or petrol. Petrol, it is even more cheaper, but diesel, it is some 25 to 30% cheaper. So overall, I am saying there is huge arbitrage available. There is huge potential available. And we have been dealing with this fossil fuel for the last, say, 170, 180 years. And we are very much accustomed to this. So rather than a human being has a very inherent tendency to go for the least effort option. So today the least effort option to actually go for energy security would be emphasize on the fossil fuel which are there, and there we will be moving more from oil to gas, because every barrel of oil which you import, against that, if you import an LNG equivalent in terms of kilocalories, etc., you save 40%. So a $50 barrel will actually save you $19 to $20 on the barrel, with giving you the same calories if you import gas instead of that. So there is a natural shift from gas, which is oil, which is going to happen to gas, and therefore gas is going to be eroded, and gas is going to be oil is going to be eroded, gas is going to be more, and this will complement the renewables also. So the cleaner fuels will start coming in smaller measures, but on a large chunk basis in the next 30 to 40 years, there will be no dearth of either the gas molecule or the oil molecule. All we need to do is be sure that we don't fall into the trap of the producers by not allowing them to. At the national level, we are putting up our infrastructure. But at the international level, where you need to have liquefaction plants, you need to have upstream pipelines. If supposing by any chance the producers don't put up because there is less incentive for them, because there is less arbitrage and people are not committing on a long-term basis, so we as consumers or buyers need to go ahead and put up our infrastructure there so we can invest there also. So the whole idea is that if I'm able to capture a wellhead molecule at the wellhead price, then this becomes completely agnostic to any index benchmark, whether it is Henry Hub, whether it is Brent, whether it is JCC, whether it is JKM, not bothered, because I am picking up the molecule at the wellhead at well price, and then I'm adding up all the infrastructure cost, which is allowing it to travel from there, whether it is the pipeline or liquefaction or shipping or regas and into the pipeline. And then we just do the mathematics. And when we complete, we say that, okay, for us, a molecule will never out the energy security. It's only the disruptions which we need to be careful about. And the disruption where we need to do is that if there is a war which happens and something happens, then from my side as a person to think the plan B as a project man. The plan B is already there in India. The amount of generating capacity is 370 gigawatts above. So the point is that, and we are hardly consuming 70 gigawatts, not more than that, hardly 50% of that. So if the push becomes a shove, you actually have a plan B in the form of all these power sectors available, which may cost slightly more at that point of time. But that, remember, it's a plan B only. It's not going to be there always there effectively. So on the first 30 years, I would say that energy security today, we should be very safe in terms of calling this new fossil fuel as a renewable. And it is going to be environment friendly. It is going to be cheap. It is going to be available, because now you are actually in a buyer's market and you are creating a pull factor. Yes, and until there is a war, there is a complete disruption, the arbitrage is so large that molecules are going to flow to the market, and one is pretty confident that it's going to be there. So this is this part. Now let me come to the other part. The other part is that when you now look at the new technology coming, the new technology is this cusp part which I'm talking about, that now the economy is moving where these three things which I talked about is converging. And that convergence on communication is that instant communication in terms of internet, in terms of WhatsApp, in technology in a very generic manner. Everybody, and Ajay would be very much conversant with that, which I am not, is IoT, which is Internet of Things. So the internet of all these three elements available, there is a backdrop available, and it is moving us into a case where the marginal cost is actually reaching for every OPEX which you create in terms of the every product which you are going to go higher and higher is actually going to be lower and lower, and ultimately is going to hit zero. The way today it is happening for publishing or the music industry or even this, say, Zoom we are talking about today. Now, this particular conversation which we are happening is virtually at zero cost to all of us, because you have actually had somebody has done this particular platform available for all of us, and we have logged into it. We are paying some rental for this, but the amount of rental which we are paying and the amount of usage on a delta basis on every time we use it further is hardly any cost. So we are freely using all this. So now when we are looking at all this, the next part of the Indian energy security perhaps should be that in the next 30 years, we should now to see that how we really put all this money into a system where these renewables which we are actually going to be causing power or creating that in terms of distribution. Say, for instance, example, Germany today is 38% on solar power, and therefore all rooftops are generating power. Everybody is a generator and everybody is a consumer. So from that point of view, there is no wheeling required. You can put it into the grid, you can buy it from the grid, you can do whatever you want. So the incremental cost there is hardly anything. But then this creation of this infrastructure, which is creating solar panels on the rooftops, which is creating windmills, etc. I think very rightly so, India, by the Prime Minister moving this international solar, what is called agency or whatever, ISA, is basically a very, very important part, the International Solar Alliance. It is a very important part that somebody is now giving a concept that look, from it, and people are ultimately preparing their own applications and moving on to them at very, very marginal cost, etc. And then allowing all that to happen, and ultimately the cost of, I would say, deriving back from the investment which you are doing. There is a concept which has been given by a person called the aggregate efficiency, which actually says that if supposing I am converting one matter to energy, like for instance, the example he has given is that if a lion kills an antelope and is eating the antelope, the conversion of energy which is coming to him is only 10% or 15%. 18% of the meat is going waste because it is not being converted into energy, and therefore that is the loss. Actually killed the matter and you converted it into energy, but the matter killed has lost 85% out of that. So that 85% is now going to be used out of this, and therefore we will be in a position to really take advantage of this. So therefore my next suggestion is that India should realize that for the next 30 years, while we are concentrating and making infrastructure for the fossil fuels, etc., which is going to remain, but now the third revolution is going to come up, and this revolution is going to switch over from the fossil fuel to the renewables, and that is going to be the perfect solution. So therefore, today we have a good enough solution, which used to be perfect at some time, but today we have a good enough solution. So let's foster it, let's preserve it for the next 30, 40 years till the time we progress to the next solution. And once we go there, within this 30, 40 years, we do the investment into that. And there also the investment will be moving to the solar, moving to the wind, moving to nuclear, moving to hydrogen. India already has committed some 450 gigawatts coming from the renewable sources, some 185 coming from the wind and solar part, etc. So I am saying we are already into that. So if we are able to stick to that, if we are able to be serious about it, and we are able to hold that, I think India, being a buyer, being a consumer on such a large basis, has endowed, like fossil fuel, we may not be endowed with great geology because we have hard technology comes in. We would be in a position to really capture all that and do that. So my suggestion, and the government in both the things I'm saying is doing the right thing. Whether in the first 30 years we are talking about, all infrastructure which they are investing is in the right direction. All that we now want to do is make it happen and increase the customer base. And in the next part also, we have realized it early. It has not picked up to the extent it should. But I think in the next 30 years, we should be there to see that we go all out to see that we have all infrastructure available in terms of the solar, in terms of wind, etc. And we do investments in that. And the more important part is creating the infrastructure in terms of the IoTs, which we are going to plug in everywhere. And I'll end with this small example. The head of Daimler basically was asked that what are you looking at, and you have been ahead, because they were the guys who gave us the IC engine in the beginning. So when you had given that technology, you were ahead of the curve. Instead of steam, you gave us IC engines. So they are now ahead here also. What they have done, that they have actually put up these IoTs in their trucks, which are traveling, some 300,000 trucks which travel. And what they are now doing, they are actually managing the logistics on the internet of the movement, basically. And what they are doing, at any point of time, if you want to ask them, their availability of trucks which are going to allow movement for the smaller players. So a small player can actually log on to their highway and understand that how he wants to plan his logistics, and then book some capacity in that and say that, okay, I would like to move X amount from this place to that place. And since live I am seeing that that warehouse is empty today, and this warehouse is actually having space, so I cannot put it here. So I will move it to that place. So they can plan their things and they can buy that part. And here, once again, I'm saying that this information which they are laying across is because they are plugging in these IoTs, which today somebody was actually indicating that whatever is in millions is going to be in trillions applied. Every house perhaps is going to be 500 to 1,000 IoT transducers placed, which is going to give you online information. And how you use that online information is going to be the next energy, which is actually going to be. So overall, I'm saying that investment in these kind of investment in infrastructure of the production part, and then the data analytics part, how you are going to utilize that part, anticipating that and doing all that, is something which we provide. Our consumption of energy is going to go higher and higher and higher, although efficiencies are going to go up, and therefore I would say the amount, had it gone up because of the previous efficiencies, would have been much higher, but still it is going to be higher. And people say that in the next decade or two, it will be quadrupled basically in terms of the Indian consumption on a per capita basis, which is required effectively. So on a summarizing basis, let me just say that the picture is good for India. We are in the right kind of frame of mind when we are looking at it. Fossil fuels are helping us to really do this. Even if we are in a buyer, we are in a commanding position there. So we are in control. Only thing is we need to play out well. We have a plan B also already available with us. So we need to not worry about that as well. And going forward beyond the 3 decades or 4 decades, we have another plan. And if we play that well.
Yes. So, so first question is from Ajay Chitnis. So his question is, our LNG imports are currently happening on foreign flagships. When do you think we can become Atmanirbhar on this, in this aspect?
Actually, what is happening is there was a move that we actually start manufacturing ships here in India also. But when we saw the whole movement of ships which is happening in the manner and the arbitrage which is available in terms of the crisscrossing happening because of this watertight point-to-point long-term contracts, we realize that the market is moving from long-term contracts on 100% long-term to nearly 70% long-term and 30% in the market, which is going to be there to utilize various ships which are going to be available in the market. So with the restriction of the Indian flagship, there are too many restrictions which come up for the movement, and therefore when we were when we were chartering our ships, because we were required to pick up cargoes from anywhere, wherever required, and then come into the system. Perhaps our shipping department, when they were lining up, they realized that having it on an open basis with foreign flagships was better. And therefore we have done, and as of today, when we are looking at, I think shipping industry is also going through a phase where there is a concept which we are talking in the LNG industry, which is called the Uberization of LNG shipping. What is happening is that today, when we want to buy a cargo which is 250 crores, we need minimum 45 days to see that ships, we are able to capture all the ships which are moving around. But by the time 45 days happen, the price of LNG changes. So there is a market issue which is happening. So what we are trying to do is, can there be a software developed? And we are already into it. Petronet is actually in touch with people, McKinsey, etc. We are trying to work out with them. That can we really look at that we pick up the telephone and buy a cargo, and in 48 hours, which is equivalent to a 3-minute time for waiting time for Uber, can we get a cargo here? And that will depend that every ship location is mapped, every ullage in the ship, in the tank is mapped, every liquefaction capacity of the plant is known, every regas capacity of the plant is known. So when all that is known and put up onto the system, which is a difficult job, but perhaps in the whole process, this will move in that direction ultimately. And just to give you a small example, we buy a gas from US and Europe buys gas from Qatar. Now, if there is a swap which we do, from US we send to Europe, and from Qatar we buy, we save nearly 1740 nautical miles of travel. And we save nearly 41 days of travel time. On a per MMBTU basis, we save $1.1 per MMBTU. Now, this is happening when you have the flexibility around. So if you don't have the flexibility, you will end up losing all this arbitrage, which today is now going to be encashed by people.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next question is from President Ajay Dubey. Will fossil fuel, especially gas, play a role in clean energy like hydrogen?
Yes. In fact, right now what is happening is that the hydrogen extraction is happening from gas effectively. So on a distributed basis, we are now planning that the LNG retail outlets which we are going to put up now at locations will have storages there of LNG. So there we are saying, and the PNGRB is also mandated, that at any station now you must have multi options. You must have LNG, you must have LCNG, you must have CNG, you must have bio compressed gas, you must have hydrogen mixed LNG, basically. So all that is happening. So definitely hydrogen is going to be extracted from these gases.
Sure. Okay. So from Uday Dharmadikari, what would be an impact on energy security if India becomes less dependent on oil?
So that's what I'm trying to say. The point is that today oil and gas both are becoming cheaper and cheaper day by day. So less from oil, if it increases on gas, you are straight away saving 40% per barrel, and therefore that saving comes to you immediately. But like I said, that perfect is always the enemy of good. So therefore the perfect solution is going to be the final solution, which is the renewables, which has to be there. And the way the technology is moving exponentially, may not be far away that it happens. But the other part is, since already an easy solution has been made available by abundance of gas and oil being available at cheap prices, so maybe this solution may get procrastinated for a longer time, but it will come.
Okay.
So even if oil doesn't come to our place, we should be affected because the alternates are available to us.
Sure. Okay. Uh, Another question from Ravi Kapoor. Is the technology available to electronically capture associated gas that is flared from oil wells?
Economically, not electronically.
Oh, sorry, economically. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So today what is happening is that by and large, if you see, flaring for no rhyme or reason is criminal. And today all flaring in India which is happening is only technical flaring. There may be some places where some shutdowns are happening because of that, some issues may be there, but they're technical flaring. Technical flaring means that there is a certain amount in the process. When you have to maintain that process, there are certain release valves which will have to be allowed to release some gas so that the hazards don't occur and the equipments are safe. So when those get released, they get accumulated in that, and then they go up right up to the flare top and they are burnt there. So what you're seeing is essential technical flaring. There are very few places where you will find that wells are just being flared, because today if you are not using a well, you cap it. And the associated gas by and large is not being allowed to be flared because there are penalties on that effectively. Here also and globally as well. So overall, sure, I'm saying that you will not get any gas which is unnecessarily being flared. Unless there are blocks, that's a separate issue. Then there's a disaster.
One last question.
Yes. So I'll take the last question. So from Uday, I think so. What India need to do to improve World Energy Index ranking to reach to top 50, if not top 100? What Switzerland is doing different to remain at number 1?
This, I would say that ultimately, all of us have to move, because if you look at the new members coming into the fraternity, that is the millennial child, he is much more biosphere conscious now. So therefore, any energy which we are using now, and in the index, when you are saying, I'm sure I'm not aware about the elements of that, but I'm presuming that the index would be ranking you higher if you are using the energy without polluting the environment. And therefore, the index, as we are going forward, and the way I was trying to talk to you about the way the Indian government is also seeing and the way we are looking at things, perhaps there will be a time when we move toward the renewable part and we move towards a more cleaner part. We are still better off as compared to many other developed countries because we are still within the range of the pollution allowed. We will not, the COP21, which we have committed of actually 30-35% of the 2005 level. Let me share this with you. We are on track on that. We are not behind that. So we are conscious about it. And I'm sure that if these technologies, the way I'm looking at and I'm saying that they are happening, and today we may not be realizing, but the government, somebody in the government is really thinking well and wanting to preempt all this which is going to come. No doubt there are other selfish interests in the system which are driving them as well. But nevertheless, we are on the right track. We are claiming, say, 100 units, we may be doing 20, 25 only. But still we are on the right track.
Okay.
Thanks.
Ajay, before this, I have one question to him. Am I permitted to ask?
Okay.
Prabhat, you know, politicians, a lot of politics, they talk about India becoming superpower. Right? I just want to know from you, in terms of an energy security, how important it will play a role to become an India to a superpower?
No, that is true. Look, we already have the population power, we already have the consuming power. Now, if we are able to produce also energy at the cheapest rate which is there, then brain power we already have. Because if you really see, if you pick up the top CEOs world over, most of the places, somebody was commenting that in a room there were some 60 CEOs which were sitting, and somebody made a comment that the net worth of these CEOs is more than half the population of the world. Now I'm sure out of those 60 there must have been 8 or 9 or 10 Indians basically. So if you have that kind of power with you, only thing is we need to keep our system set, and whatever I think the political system, the bureaucratic system, etc., it is taking more time. But the best part today is that these millennials are actually putting up these startups. They are moving into, and the way the connectivity is happening in the globe, it is now coming to our favor because nobody is being able to restrict them. If supposing I have a startup idea today, tomorrow I actually put my idea into place, form a company. Day after I get some venture capitalist who does something to me, and the day after I am connected to some 1 million people, and then beyond that I'm earning 10 cents for everybody, and therefore I'm a millionaire suddenly. So there is no bureaucrat or red tape till now, fortunately, which has been able to curtail this part. So till the time they actually find the vaccine for this could have gone ahead and we could have reached where we have. So that's my belief is that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I'll request Rotarian Ajay Chitnis to do the vote of thanks, please. Ajay. Where is Ajay?
Where is gone? I will take it over.
Uday, can you?
Yeah, okay.
Do it?
Prabhat, it was nice hearing. In fact, it's one of the very like what Shrikant has said in the beginning. It's really a very interesting, of the energy security. Not only that, in the sectors which you are there. I had many questions to you about projects of what challenges and other things you face, and I'm sure that offline we can get into it.
Anytime.
But I tell you, it's really a very important that now India needs to really start thinking and develop probably an alternate source of energy, and this is the topic which I think should come in the forefront of everything.
Right.
If we really have to take it, so thank you very much for really enlightening all our members, about the energy security, about the importance of this. And I am sure that the LNG, which is today maybe 5 to 6% of the total energy fuel or something, will go to 15, 20, 25% over a period of time, if we really have to get into energy. So thank you very much for enlightening. Thank you very much for being, with us, for this is spending your very valuable time. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much. And I would just mention one more thing I forgot. Biogas is also coming up in a big way.
Correct.
And that is the bottom of the pyramid contribution. So that is going to be a big thing.
Okay. Vimal, can you show us the certificate of appreciation? Prabhat, this is from our club, electronic certificate of appreciation.
I'm honored. I'm honored, and I would have never imagined that the way you will give me a certificate. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very